Welcome to the Reef Therapy Podcast, session 65. Today we're going to start with a little tank-based therapy session. We'll go through some comments that we had on the last podcast episode, and we're going to talk about some other things like keeping your interest in the hobby, the recent influx of fires at local fish stores if we get to it. But first of all, let's start by welcoming Raj back to America. Let's go, Raj. All right.
Yeah.
How was South Africa?
South Africa was cool. It's very different, way colder than I expected it to be. I guess I should have checked the weather app and be more prepared, but it was cold.
Like cold like 40s, cold like 20s?
No, man, I'm a tropical people. It was like 50s. Yeah.
I feel like when you go on vacation, though, you expect it to be warm, right?
You do. And, you know, I just really did not expect it to be in the 50s at all.
Yeah.
But it was nice. Yeah. I lost a couple of days.
We saw some pictures. We saw some pictures. You sent a photo of an elephant.
Yeah.
And you said you took a lot of photos while you were there, but I don't think that I've seen a lot of them yet. You haven't posted many of them. So is there any highlights from your trip that you'd like to share?
I took over 400 photos.
Wow.
So I have a lot of editing work to do. They're still on my camera. I haven't even offloaded them off the memory card yet. So hopefully I got some good shots. But I did get to see a lion kill, which was pretty fantastic.
Were you up in Kruger, or where'd you go?
Yeah, I went to Kruger.
Nice.
And just the noise, the sound was really, I guess it was cool. It was just different. It was interesting. That was probably the best thing there. I did see white rhinos, a big group of them, and we were looking for them for, like a day and a half and couldn't find them. And then just came across a pod. We could hear them, and it was really cool as the guide hopped out, got, they arm up, and he's like, man, I'm not supposed to do this. You guys stay in here. And he just goes into the bush. And we're like, whoa, this is going to be awesome. And I'm totally thinking, okay, I'm filming this because if he comes running out with a rhino after him, this is going to make for great footage, and it's going to be incredible. But they're grazing, and we actually got to step out, and we're on foot now in safari watching these rhinos just graze, just feet away from us. It was so cool.
That is awesome. I imagine in my head that this is like the Tyrannosaurus Rex scene in Jurassic Park where they just upload a sheep or a goat or something. Or was that all natural that you saw the kill?
It's all natural. Yeah, they're just there. And right now, the impala are in their mating season, and so the males will fight. And when they're fighting, they're not really paying attention, and that's when the lions will strike, and it's easy picking for them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You went to the aquarium there? How was that?
I did, and it was a really cool aquarium. I wasn't expecting it to be as nice as it was, but they had this really cool jelly room set up, and it was just your standard moon jelly, so nothing special in that regard, but the room was dark, and it had mirrors. So when you walk in, it looked like there was hundreds of these jelly cylinders, but there was maybe 4 or 6 of them, something like that. Probably got that totally wrong, and they're going to yell at me now, but it was just really, really neat. And even though there were people in there, because it's dark, it didn't seem like there were people there. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I love when aquariums get innovative with, okay, so maybe we don't have hundreds and hundreds of jellyfish, but how can we simulate that? How can we simulate how these guys migrate in the ocean and just kind of go with the current and all that stuff? That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so.
it was cool because jellies to me are kind of boring, right? They're cool for like 20 seconds, and you're like, all right, they're still doing the same thing, and the only reason they have color right now is because of the LEDs. But this was a cool spin on it, and I found myself just wandering around that room for 15 minutes. And if you're entertained by jellies for 15 minutes, that's impressive.
Yeah. I always think it's wild how, you could be out in the ocean and, you see just a random like irukandji jellyfish that could just, wipe you out, paralyze you or whatever. It's just crazy. Those things are just, randomly meandering through the water. Obviously moon jellies aren't in that category, but very cool that you get to see all the coral. Did they have I find with a lot of public aquariums, they don't have a solid representation of coral. Did they actually have a good representation of coral
They
there?
had a really good reef tank in there with mixed coral. It was nicely done and really well kept. All the tanks were super clean, really colorful. It wasn't a very big aquarium, but I say that, but it had a few levels, so it was actually bigger than I expected. But it was really, really well done. And yeah, it had corals, and it had your. I'll have to show you guys this video of some of the exhibits that they did. Just super creative, super creepy. The jellyfish one was really cool. The kids got to go up in. It's one of those tanks where you can walk underneath it and stick your head inside. Well,
Cool.
all the clownfish would just gather right there on top of your head, and the kids were just freaking out about it. So I just sat there watching random people walking inside this thing and getting surrounded by clownfish.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the coral display that we have at the St. Louis Aquarium is, I think it's like a 600-gallon tank. It's not bad, but it just doesn't draw. People. I remember when they first opened, and we're going through, and they've got these. They don't have this all the time, but they would have like a liaison in each room that kind of explained further what the animals were. And of course, the coral tank is right next to the octopus tank, so everybody is flocking over to the octopus. But I sat there for probably, 20 minutes just looking at all the different corals in there. And I had my filter with me. I had my orange filter because they keep it blue to keep it kind of interesting for people on the fluorescent corals and whatnot. And the girl comes up to me and she goes, you've probably spent the most time here than anybody yet. And I think it's one of those things where this not as impressive if you're maybe not in the hobby or don't really understand what you're looking at. And I think that's why they like to keep it all flowy and, anemones and long polyp, sarcophyton and all that kind of stuff. But that's cool. I look forward to the videos and the pictures.
Yeah, it'll take me a while, but I should have some really, really cool shots.
By editing, do you mean editing like pterodactyls?
Yes.
Coming out of the sky?
I used to do that. I used to put velociraptors into pictures, just little Easter eggs to see if anybody caught them. And they were on family pics, so that worked out really nicely.
Very cool. Well, it's good to have you back. What's everybody drinking tonight? What do you got, Raj?
Got a Florida beer right here, a little local Tampa brewery, High Lie. It's an IPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every time we drive
Mark?
to Florida, there's a billboard with that beer. And then for the rest of the drive, I have that song stuck in my head. Jai la la, jai la la. You know that song? Which is, sorry, not to go off topic, but that's all they can.
No, I love it. You should sing more.
And then boom, it's in my head now because of that. And I know that's not how you pronounce the beer, but I'm just drinking Heineken, man. I'm boring. It's what I had in the house. So
I've got this. We're gonna try it.
Uh-oh.
cherry lime.
I want you guys to try this with me. I'm gonna open it and try it. This is that. I think it's a hard seltzer. So it says it's vodka water.
Ooh.
So let's try it out. Let's all go for this.
There was a time Jake called me and said he might have a beer sponsor for the Reef Therapy podcast and that we would be drinking their beer on the podcast. Whatever happened to that? Did you get access to those emails, Raj?
Was he talking about Coda Brewery?
No, it was
Right
like an
next door to the
alcohol
studio.
distributor, I think, that distributed certain types of beers nationally or something,
Ooh.
which would be a really kind of unexpected sponsor for a reef-related podcast.
No, but that would be fantastic.
I love it.
We need to, gonna have to look into that.
This tastes like one of those all-inclusive resorts lobbies smells. If that makes any sense at all. Like I taste it and I feel like I'm at a sandals resort.
Is that a bad
I
thing?
don't know. No, not really. I don't know. It's more, it's like, it almost tastes a little bit like LaCroix. There's a hint of cherry lime in there. So
Like they took cherries in the other room,
Yeah, have you seen those LaCroix ads?
wafted it over.
yeah.
This can of seltzer was transported on a truck next to some oranges. Oh, man.
That's great. Mark, how has your week been?
Good, man. Well, busy, crazy. Automated water exchange came in handy because, like, last weekend, I said, I'm going to mix up a big old batch of salt water. I'm going to do water changes on both my tanks. And then I ended up just being crazy busy between work and kid home schedules. So it was, it was like, oh, this is why I went through all the pain in the ass of running 1/4-inch tubing everywhere and, have a dosing pump and all that. Because it's like I've got one of those little boxes. Like there's a guy on Etsy that makes little, what is it called? It uses the, is it 10 volt? Like the, man, I'm drawing a blank. It's been a long day. But
There's
you
an
can
Etsy
pretty much...
guy making reef stuff?
Yeah, which works with Apex, right? And so, like a breakout box basically with buttons and switches. So it's pretty sweet because I just open up one little valve, and then I press a button, and the water change begins, and on the big reef. And you don't even really need the valve because a peristaltic pump is a valve, right, when it's turned off. But since my water exchange dose is in the basement and it's siphoning water and then pumping it into a drain in the basement, I'm just worried like if the peristaltic tubing ever cracks or something, I'd have a siphon coming out of my tank, right? So it would be this funny thing where I've got one dosing pump pumping RO water up as the sump level dropped and another one just siphoning it back down into my basement floor. So in abundance of caution, I did add like a manual valve. So, because I don't do continuous water exchanges like some people do. I just, I do like a 24-hour, 30-gallon water change. And then on the smaller tank, I just do it old school with a Python and a pump connected to a hose to refill it. So I did something productive reef related this week,
So you actually let it run for 24 hours.
I'm not going to lie, and I don't want to piss off the Neptune people, but every time you go to bed and it's still going, and I'm like, it's, okay, for the record, the thing has been uber reliable. So there's, this has nothing to do with actual experience. But it just doesn't look like a device that you should run at high speed for 24 hours. It doesn't have a robustness to it, especially if you've taken one apart. You're like, okay, And then you see the same style pump heads on Alibaba for like, you're like, but it has served me well. And at that point in time, there was really no other option. I know Kimura has one now. GHL just released like a large volume peristaltic maxi again, an updated version. So there are options now. If you have better ideas, Raj, because you build industrial grade stuff, let me know. Because
there's devices used in the medical industry that are very, very robust, and that's the stuff to use. And you can find them on eBay for a fraction of the price. They're still expensive. But, you replace the tubing and things like that, and you've got a solid performer. But even with that, I just never had the guts to let it run overnight. I can't sleep. It's just, with my luck, something's going to happen. I'm going to wake up and my house is destroyed. And then my wife's going to yell at me. So I got both of those things going. And, yeah, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
what was your question?
I was just going to say, what am I searching for on eBay?
Oh, man, you would ask me that.
Like,
I'm going to...
Like what keywords?
I'll think of it.
Okay.
I do have a...
I just want to see this $4,000 pump that you speak of. That's half price.
I do have a paranoid level amount of leak detectors, too. So there's that. But... The thing that keeps me up at night is that my RODI is hard plumbed to my tap with just 2 electrical solenoid switches. And then I also have a mechanical float switch that like most people use, right? That'll cut it off. But then I saw a guy on one of the forums where the push connect part of the solenoid cracked, and that's on the feed side, right? So it's not like, oh, the float switch got stuck or something. So I do lose some sleep over that, and I ordered this robotic arm that will turn like a plumbing valve on and off, and then that has leak detectors, and I was so happy with that. But the thing would just like close the valve like randomly. Like I'd be like, what the hell, why is my RODI empty? And I look over and the thing had like closed the valve. So it was like $300 too. It was a total waste of money. So I had to disconnect that. I've looked at, they make like valves, like mechanical valves that open and close. So it's not like a solenoid, like a magnet that gets like electro, where the solenoid gets really hot while it's open. It's just open and close. But yeah, I know that's another one I need to figure out, something that I would feel better about. So
it's kind of like that meme where you lay the one where you lay down in bed at night, and then as you're going to sleep, there's a thought bubble that pops up that you left the RODI on.
Well, I've actually flooded my basement and had to file an insurance claim, and it had nothing to do with my reef tank. But seeing the damage that water can do, and then having like the insurance claim was like $40,000, and then they had to rip out drywall because drywall just is like a sponge and sucks up all the water. Yeah. So they cut out all the drywall, I think about 3 or 4 feet high. I mean, it was just hell. It was just brutal. And I was like, God, this is what my reef tank could do. That's like, I have anxiety about it all the time. One day I'm just going to get out of the hobby just because that'd be like the first night. I'm like, man, I don't know why I slept so good,
Will you still do reef therapy though?
Maybe. I'll just talk about trees.
Don't forget the moths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That it was a fun fact. I forget the exact commenter's name, but the Luna moth eats sweet gum.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I've seen them chilling on my fence every year, and it's just this gigantic lime green moth. They're beautiful, and so I was like, oh, well, that explains it. Yeah, so it was good to know. I learned something.
Masterflex. Masterflex is the pump.
Okay, yeah.
Master Flex peristaltic pump.
They're usually about
$500.
Oh, that's not bad.
300.
That's not bad at all. They used to be about $2,500 ish.
Oh, here we are, 2,100.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you need a dual, right? One to remove and one to add. Oh yeah. $2,000.
Yeah. I told you they were spicy.
Yeah.
We can't play in Raj's playground. It's just not accessible.
You guys are setting me up.
For most humans. So for me this week, I've been mainly focused on this weekend, which by the time everybody hears this, I will have gone to Orlando, shot several videos at Top Shelf Aquatics, and then gone to the Reef Builders studio, shot several videos at the Reef Builders studio, which will all be up and coming. And I'm just praying for no delays. That would be great.
You forgot the part where you take the Altum Angels and you bag them up for me and ship those to me. Secretly without anybody looking.
I'll give that responsibility to somebody else. I don't think I've shipped coral, but I've never shipped fish before. I'm sure it's the same. Or I guess maybe talk to Windsor about that.
I don't even have a freshwater tank right now to put them in, but it's like every time I see them in a video, or when we were there at Reef Stock, I was like, dang, I need those fish. Yeah.
I'll send you some video. How about that? Okay. I'll text you.
That'd be great.
So this weekend's going to be jam-packed. As we kind of get into the podcast here a little bit further, I wanted to address something that has come up in the comments a couple times. Obviously, this is a reefing podcast, but I'm kind of trying to play this. I'm wondering, do you, in the comment section, please let us know, do you like more of a meandering podcast or like a main topic driven kind of podcast? I don't know if you guys have a preference, Raj or Mark, but they seem to have been meandering for the past. I don't mind that. I love just talking about reef tanks and all that there is about it. But we've had several main topics, I think, so far as well. So what do you guys think?
I think our conversations just naturally meander, right? I mean, wherever we're talking and whenever we're talking, let's say we're talking out after a show and we're talking reef, it does just kind of meander and we go off on tangents. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comment section if there is a preference. I'm sure that everybody's going to say a little bit of both, and that's what, in radio I usually get. You'd be like, "Do you like option A or option B?" And people will say, "I like option C," even though C is not an option. Also, I wanted to run this by you, Mark. How do you feel, and how does everybody feel in the comment section below about a new segment called Mark's Coral of the Week?
Oh, man, you're putting me on the spot. You can make me have homework.
Where you just choose a coral in the hobby. It could be anything. Some of your favorites. You don't have to do a whole lot of research. I mean, you are, your brain is filled with a bunch of reefing knowledge already. And we just kind of like talk about growth pattern and where we would put it in the tank and kind of coloration and all that kind of stuff. And
See, like this week, it could be Xenia.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's taking over.
Venezuela.
But what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Xenia is taking over the reefs down in Venezuela.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a non-native species there, and somehow it made it over, and it's just covering everything and choking out all the local corals, and then it's dwindling the fish population because now it's not, a proper reef anymore, and it's got Xenia that the fish don't interact with, don't eat, don't mess with. So it's a pretty big problem, and they're trying to figure out, well, how do they get rid of it? You can't, if you mechanically try to remove it, you guys know what happens when you, scrape Xenia. You just make Xenia frags that are going to spread and start going everywhere. So they've got a big problem on their hands.
Interesting. I wonder if it's Red Sea pom-pom or if it's, I'll have to look. I'll have to read up. I didn't know this.
Xenia elongata. I guess the article says this was, I think Jeremy wrote this. It was, the name was revised in 2021 to Unamia stolonifera.
See,
or fura.
I screwed up the name again. Xenia was a cool name. And
Very
then they
cool.
got a...
So was elongata.
Right?
When is this article? I don't even see the article. It's on Reef Builders? Oh, there we go.
Yep. Yesterday.
Totally missed it.
It was believed to have become established in the Caribbean following its introduction by the aquarium trade, so it's our fault. And was found by a marine biologist in 2007. The first scientific report on the invader was published in 2014. So someone from the hobby, or several people from the hobby, dumped it because it's a pest. Not a pest, but it's, it grows fast in the aquarium. And it's thriving, apparently. That's crazy. That's kind of like, I feel like tilapia is kind of like that in a lot of places.
But I'm Google mapping it now, which, that's really exciting for everybody that's listening. Is it Venezuela or is it Ecuador that is a big exporter of oil as well?
Venezuela.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I blame the oil tankers again, just like the lionfish, man.
Sure.
So.
It could have come from almost anywhere. I mean, any of the shipping vessels or, like you said, oil vessels. I mean, we're just an easy target because we're defenseless. I mean, who do we really have speaking out for us? PJAC. And they represent dogs and cats and lizards and all the other pets too. So we have a very small voice when it comes to defending ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the background. This is the first time I've heard of it, so it could very likely be like, no, it was, a guy named Ted We know he dropped it. You know, like they may have like a smoking gun, but I don't know. Yeah, it's, you know, or it's a scientist that started Googling Xenia and was like, you know, when he was researching this invasive species, and then he got like every coral vendor's website, you know, on the search results, and was like, oh, freaking reef keepers, you know. So
Yeah.
who knows? I don't know.
I wonder how popular reef keeping is in Venezuela.
I don't know. I know Brazil's got a lot of really great hobbyists. I mean, at least I've seen some really amazing tanks out of Brazil. I'm not so sure about Venezuela. I know there's a killer softy tank in Puerto Rico that some guy posts every once in a while. So it's always kind of cool when you see tanks from other places in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to know if there's some Venezuelan reefers tuning in and like to see those tanks.
Yeah, and if one's got a lot of Xenia in it, then you know. I shouldn't joke, like, this is terrible, but it's not great, but I don't know. It's always us, you know. So we're always, I noticed the freshwater hobby is struggling now that they're trying to get a petition going because I think fish farms, freshwater tropical fish farms are potentially in trouble in Florida from, you know, getting rid of them for the whole invasive species problem. So, and then the majority of freshwater fish are farmed in Florida. So, I mean, that would just, that's the end of that then, you know, if that gets, again, I didn't read the whole legislation. It's just something that popped up on my news feed this morning and, you know, hey, sign this petition. And I was like, well, and then you want to sign it, but you're also like, well, I want to know both sides of the story. I want to know what's actually going on. And to be fair, I mean, you know, if there's anywhere where they should limit what kind of pets you keep and stuff, I don't want to piss off Florida reef keepers, but it's like Hawaii and Florida, you know, it is prime ecosystem for a lot of things, you know, that we like to keep as pets. So, but I mean, maybe that's that. I mean, it's already pretty bad down there. You got pythons and
iguanas falling out of the trees when it gets colder.
They got chameleons down there now.
Oh.
I don't know if it's the veiled or Jackson's chameleon, but I mean, there's YouTube videos of guys at night with headlamps, like hunting chameleons. Which those are actually kind of cool, you know. Like if I lived in Florida and I saw a chameleon in my backyard, I'd be pretty excited about it. And I don't know how bad they are for the ecosystem. I mean, Hawaii has what are those day geckos from Madagascar, but nobody really is too bothered by them because they're not really making a bad impact like this Xenia is. So
yeah. Well, if you're from Venezuela, let us know. More insight and or love to see your tanks.
Yeah, or if you're the guy that dumped the Xenia and we want to know who you are.
Yeah. It's a bounty. But yeah, Mark, are you on board with that?
I'll do it every once in a while. I don't know if I'm gonna do it every week.
We can't say Mark's coral every other week. That doesn't really have a ring to it.
He's gonna have to go get his book.
I don't expect a dissertation.
Okay,
here.
like a 5-second segment, like
yeah.
Okay.
Like just get us started on Montipora, you know.
Because I can't keep up with all the, you know, this is the Dragon Soul Day Glow Puke Lemonade. Like, I don't know any of that. You know, if you want to talk about, like, you know, euphyllias and that's cool. Yeah, we could talk about that. I'll probably get a lot wrong, too. I'm sure there'll be some comments of, like, that's not true. I keep that coral in a cave with no light. You know? So...
Yeah, but that's okay. I think I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be good. And I'm not expecting you to come up with like let's talk about the stratosphere zoanthid today and its current price in the market.
Okay, good.
But
let's talk about like the actual like scientific names of things and just you know why we like to keep them as you know reef keepers in the hobby. You know,
and then
what intrigues you about them.
And then after that, we're going to give you a name of one of these made up corals, and then you have to guess at what it is and describe what it looks like.
Yeah,
me,
and we'll see how close you are. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I will
you just gotta
fail
guess.
miserably.
Me too. I don't know any of them, but I'd much rather pick on you than
So
pick on me.
if I say, what is a Jason Fox ass crack? Or sorry, as crack. What is that?
I'm gonna guess it's a zoanthe, just because they
Yeah,
have the
right?
weirdest names.
Exactly.
I was on the phone
You
with
probably just say
Chris
zoanthe.
Meckley. Was it 2 nights ago or last night? And we were talking about a coral, and it's a Montipora. And then I was like, yeah, that's a really cool anacropora. And he was like, it just went dead silent. And I was like, oh, I got that one wrong, because it was again just a popular trade coral, that's real colorful. And then I'm like on my phone, I'm like, oh yeah, that is a Montipora. So yeah, I can't keep up with that stuff anymore. So that'll be fun. I'll look like a complete idiot, but I'll be willing to do that. I'll be willing to embarrass myself.
I think that it just I was thinking about this in the car today, and how, some people in the hobby are so adamant about making sure that everybody is like right on the money. But I think if we're all learning together,
Yeah.
and if you're wrong or I'm wrong or Roger's wrong or, commenters are wrong. I mean, we had trouble identifying Pasillopora that I got at a frag swap. And this took like 3 or 4 people to look at it and see and then identify it, so I think it's fine. It'll be fun. Mark's coral of the whenever I want.
There you go.
Well, you saw how well the book club went with Jake. I think we did that for like 3 episodes, and then just, I don't know.
Yeah, there were comments that would, people would like to do that. So I don't know.
The downside is all the books are out of print. And so it was like every time we recommended a book, it was like, go to you can find it on Amazon in the used marketplace. And then some of them are like $500. And it's like, well, dude, this book ain't worth $500. No offense to the author, but the information is dated. I mean, it's, so here's a tank with metal halides and a chiller. And you're like, it's like when I was reading Harry Potter to my daughter and they mentioned a VHS player. And my daughter was like, what's a VHS player? Like I feel like a young hobbyist. Some of the, I mean, not that chillers are outdated, but you get my point. So.
Yeah, and they're not writing any good books either. It's like there's not been a good book released in I don't know how long.
Yeah, I saw when Keith was interviewing, I don't know if it was Julian or Charles or both, and they asked, when the Reef Aquarium Volume 4 would come out. And one of them was saying, like, there's just no money in books.
Right.
And, it takes a lot of energy and time a lot of work to write a book like that and get the pictures and then the formatting. And, it's a lot of work. And then if there's really not any financial incentive to do it, it's like, well, why would you do it? Unless you're like a billionaire and you're bored. And so
and then you got to charge $75, $80 for the book too. So but the Vargas book that just came out is beautiful.
Yeah,
I've seen some one of my buddies here got it, and it's just stunning images. So really good stuff.
Yeah, it's got that
but-
Two Little Fishies vibe. Like all the Two Little Fishies books were really well done,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the comments. Stevie says, Mark spoke about lights and color expression again. What is the article / chart that he found the info on? I like hearing about it, and I am more of a visual learner. Do you have that pulled up, Mark, or do you want me to get it?
Yeah, I've got it. So I couldn't find the chart before we started the podcast, but it's somewhere in their website. But there's there's some really great blog posts. And I can add it in a comment when the video comes out too. But it's addgene.org. And if you go in their menu, I mean, they don't just talk about chromoproteins and, fluorescent proteins. They do all kinds of research, everything from stem cells and plant biology and CRISPR, which that's a fascinating subject in itself. There's a great Netflix documentary on CRISPR, which is both mind-blowing and scary.
Yeah.
But somewhere in there they have a chart, and it was really interesting about what wavelengths of light will excite those type of pigments. But then there is still the component of gene expression. And it's pretty interesting. In one of the blogs, they show where they take bacteria in, what's that stuff that they put in a petri dish, the gelatinous material?
That's a good question.
Agar or something like that. I'm just going to grab it. Yeah, in an agar plate. And they have the same bacteria expressing different chromoproteins, and it looks like a color wheel. It's crazy. Like there's blue and fluorescent yellow and pink, and so they're using it for different kinds of experiments, but they bring up corals as well, and how certain chromoproteins were first discovered in corals. I think one of the red ones was discovered in mushrooms, right? So yeah, it's a fun read. It kind of goes over the head a few times, unless you're a scientist in that field. But it got me thinking about some of the pigments like that we saw, like yellow, right? Yellow Porites, yellow Sarcophyton elegans, and they all look mustardy brown now under our lights. Even the yellow Porites does. And it got me wondering if it's because these LED diodes we use are somewhat specific in nanometers. They do sometimes do like coatings on them to kind of bump them in one direction or another to kind of create a little more variety. But again, I'm talking out of lane here because I have no expertise in this stuff, but you think about analog music, right? You've got this wavelength of sound, and that digital is a representation of that wavelength, but it's like connect the dots, It's like when you get the kids menu at the restaurant, right? It's dots that eventually, if you draw them together, form that wavelength, but there's a lot of dots missing in that wavelength in digital music. And a lot of, there's audiophile people that say they can hear the difference. I know Neil Young talks about it a lot, about the difference between analog music. And so I kind of wonder if there's something going on there with lighting too, where we're hitting the nanometers that are, definitely peak, for certain photosynthesis, right? For certain chlorophylls to get excited with photosynthesis, but are we missing some of the pieces for some of that pigment or chromoprotein or fluorescent protein expression? I don't know, because we don't have a lot of greens, and we do have reds now, but even like if you have red or green in a LED, it's like one or two diodes, right? It's just like a token green LED with like 50 blue and royal blues. So,
and I don't know how many times in the early stages of the hobby that many people are like, just turn off the red and green because it's they
you couldn't
promote algae growth or something.
Yeah, like if you had a Iwasaki or a Ushio 10K above your tank, like it was like take it or leave it, right? So
yeah.
I could be way wrong about it. It was just our last discussion. It was an experiment that Jake and I wanted to run, and then I even heard Inappropriate Reefer was trying it out with his yellow leather. I could be way off base, but it was just something like, hey, we should try this, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we'll leave that link in the description below. Atkins Nature Aquarium says, listening for the second time, I just can't get enough. I was wondering where I can find the Jake Adams shirt from Gallery Aquatica. I would love to order two from Milady, and I tried looking for myself, and I found the Julian Sprung tee, but not the Jake Adams. Thanks again, missing the Wall Street guy. I'm really enjoying this with you all.
I like that.
So I pointed him in the right direction. But yeah, if you go to the Gallery Aquatica page, I'll also link that down below if you want one of the Jake Adams shirts. And they do ship from North Carolina, not Australia. Nicole said that. So you'll get it pretty quickly. Valhalla says, awesome guys, so great for this new direction from Raj. I could be more stoked about the new podcast crew. Honestly, find I pay more attention at my reef after renewed inspiration from listening. Man, I can't stress enough how I'd be interested in signing up for the first inaugural Reef Builders dive trip. Hope that happens. Raj?
We should do it.
Mark and I were kind of fantasizing about that in the last podcast, just kind of like going off the grid and going on a little dive trip, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's the logistics is the hard part, because the best places to go for the kind of corals that we're excited about is it's far away, it's expensive, you know. Nobody I mean, Caribbean corals are awesome, but they're not really that prevalent in the hobby, right? So
Yeah, but it's boring diving, right? It's a dive to do a dive.
what, the Caribbean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
kind of like it sometimes. I like all the Gorgonians, you know. Yeah, I mean, Indo-Pacific and Red Sea is better, in my opinion, if you're a coral nerd, for sure.
I tend to like wreck dives the best, because it gives me just something else to do and interact with, and I like actually diving into the wreck where you're not supposed to go, and get that adrenaline rush up where it's already risky enough because I'm underwater breathing, but let me go into this tiny this tiny opening in this ship that's been underwater for, I don't know, 50, 100, 200 years, and see how that works out for me.
Yeah. I've got claustrophobia just thinking about that. Have you guys ever seen those cave videos where the cavers will go in and the holes that are like smaller than their body? They have to breathe. They have to hold the air in so that they can get through tiny spaces. Oh,
There's that Hollywood movie about rescuing the soccer team. Was that in Thailand, I believe?
Oh God!
And it's got like Viggo Mortensen, some other famous people in it, and I mean, it's Hollywood, right? But it's like that. Watching that movie just got me so. I mean, I was like, same like watching Free Solo when he's climbing without the rope. It's just, he lives because he's still around doing interviews, right? But like, you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, one little tiny mess up. One little tiny mess up. So yeah, if you've got a suggestion for where that dive trip should be, leave that in the comments section. I realize that those of you that are listening to the audio version cannot do that necessarily, but you can always come back to the YouTube video if you've got a place in mind. It is possible. I think, even if it is a little bit more pricey or expensive, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those, I think it's a bucket list item for a lot of people who are landlocked like me and aren't near an ocean. Australia, Great Barrier Reef, that's all like bucket list stuff, and would be willing to maybe fork over some extra dollars to go see something cool.
Well, then that's the easy solution, right? You go to Reef Stock Sydney, and we take a day and go dive.
Yeah. That's a cool idea, like in conjunction with Reef Stock.
Just a bunch of us Reef Stock coral nerds take off and go jump in the water. Because
have some of our favorite
even dive right there in the
influencers take us
harbor.
around.
There's diving there in the harbor.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know if we're allowed to dive.
That's exciting.
Where's Reef Stock Australia? Is it in Sydney?
It's in Sydney.
Okay. Yeah, but you want to go up to, was it the Gold Coast, as they call it, or whatever, where Cairns and all that stuff is?
Yeah.
That's where you really want to go.
Yeah. But get to Sydney first.
Yeah.
Then we worry about the other details later.
Yeah, that's the hard part. That's the longest flight.
Right.
Yep.
So when you get to Sydney, then you have to take another 8-hour flight just to get anywhere else in Australia. You've already committed. You've already done the 2-day flight there.
There you go. Let's do it. 2 weeks. Let's go.
I'd love to dive in Western Australia. Darwin, and then, just that whole area where they're collecting a lot of the Wilsones and those kind of corals. And I don't know, that's stuff interests me. Big, acropora dominant reefs are cool, but I don't know. I think I'd be happier in a muck dive,
I was about to say, you can't see anything. It's all dirt.
But even like in Indonesia, like muck diving in Lembeh Strait, that would to me be really cool. Like I would find that fascinating. And like Jake always talked about, like the cool weird corals grow in like the weird nasty places, you know, like the mucky places. That's where you find the really interesting LPS and stuff. So
yeah, Shane was showing me video of like all the muck areas where he's going and exploring and collecting and kind of documenting what's out there, and it looks like crap, right? It just looks like a bunch of dirt out there and there's nothing to see. But once you get close, you can see that there's stuff under there, and there's some cool looking corals. Cool for us. I don't know if they'll sell for the thousands of dollars frags sell for these days, but they're just really neat. A lot of good texture there and growth patterns, just interesting colors.
Yeah, I think if you can capture that from a video standpoint or photography, that'd be really awesome. There's a YouTuber, I don't know if you guys know Simple Aquariums, Lauren.
Oh, yeah.
She lives in Western Australia, and I remember when she was first getting going on YouTube and kind of asking for advice, I was like, please, like, start or end your videos with your freaking backyard because it's amazing. Like, it may be normal to you, but it's not normal to a lot of people, and it's beautiful. So I don't know if she's got, like, if she's diving certified or whatever, but I think that would be awesome just to have her run out there and see what's out there. But
is she coming to Sydney?
I think so. I think she'll be there. I haven't talked to her in a little bit, but yeah, I think that'd be really cool. If the Western Australia, I think she said it's like a 5-hour flight to Sydney, and it just like blows my mind because you think that everything's closer than it really is, but really all civilization is on the coast of Australia. So,
yep. See, a plan's starting to come together.
There you go. We're just working it out right here. And then we also had we talked about turtle grass last time, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
John, did those pictures come through for you?
No, man.
No.
I know you tried a second time, but
John Farr is his name. He had a comment asking for our email so that he could send us a couple of photos of his turtle grass biotope. And he actually has, it looks like it is a refugium. And he also has an indoor saltwater pond, which is awesome. But in the refugium, he's growing turtle grass. And he said that, one of your main complaints about turtle grass was that you get nuisance algae that grows on it. He said he just keeps it in super high flow, and then whenever he's doing a water change or whatever, just like kind of take his hand and waft it over the top to get it off before it, sticks. So I'm kind of thinking about doing that in this first like Ultim build. I think that'd be really cool to do some turtle grass or something like that, some seagrass of some sort.
Yeah, and there's a plant called Halophylla. Halophylla, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's got like it looks like a terrestrial plant with its leaves. It looks like a freshwater. I don't know. I wouldn't call it like a sword plant or something, but it just has these typical leaf shapes, like the oblong or whatever you want to call it, and I grew that for a while in a 40 breeder with some turtle grass and some. I want to call it shoal grass, maybe. It was like the rounded type grass blades. Uh-huh. It all grew really quickly and really well. I just had a hard time keeping it attractive looking because I did get a lot of that epiphytic algae growth happening on it. And certain tangs you put in there are going to be like, hey, all of this is really good.
Does it kind of resemble a cannabis leaf?
A little bit, because it's sort of like a cluster or like poison ivy is the way I looked at it a little bit.
Gotcha,
poison sumac, I don't know which one it is, but it just looks like something like, oh, that must have come off a tree and fallen in the water, and you're like, no, that is a type of seagrass or a saltwater plant. But there was a lady on Reef Central back in the Reef Central days, and she was growing all kinds of saltwater grasses and stuff and writing some articles about it. And she was really generous and sent me a bunch, and I had a lot of fun growing that stuff, but I don't know if you can still find it. I hope so. I hope somebody's still growing that kind of stuff or collecting it. But, and then I've seen some reef tanks with turtle grass just popping through the live rock here and there, you know, and some people just throw it in and they see what happens. So yeah, you should definitely do it. It's a fun, journey, like something new to try and get frustrated with, and then figure out what, what's not working, what is. And
those are the adventures I like.
Yeah, why not throw another variable in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think we'll see if we come around to the fire talk here. If not, we'll hit it in the next one for sure. But Rylan actually commented and said, I need a topic on how to hold interest in your tank after dealing with issues that are overwhelming and discouraging. He says, keep them coming, guys. And I know that, Mark, you and Jake kind of covered this in an episode. I think it was 41. I'm not sure do you remember what the title of that one was?
No, I think I replied to him in the YouTube comments to go check it out.
You did.
But
I think he does bring up a good point for, we kind of touched on this, I think, in maybe the very first or second one that we've done together, where you get that first outbreak of aptasia or flatworms, and you just are so overwhelmed by the amount that you have in your tank. But I think once you get through those first obstacles, you really can tackle anything, because they're really, for the most part, there's a solution for most things. There's maybe a lot of solutions for the same thing. So when you go out to the reef forums and you say, how do I get rid of green hair algae or bubble algae or whatever it is, and you get like 50 different ways to do it. Once you get it down, I think pushing through those moments. I remember my first flatworm outbreak, and the guy at my local fish store was like, just get a 6-line. And I know not all 6-lines are, keen on wiping out flatworms, but if you help them out, they'll take them out every once in a while, At least mine did. I didn't have to worry about it after I sucked out maybe 200 to 300 flatworms on my own manually, and then let the wrasse kind of take care of the rest. So that worked for me, and that was very simple because I wasn't manually doing it all. I had an organism in there kind of working for me, which was nice. So
yeah, the 6-line didn't work for me. I actually ended up with a Melanaris wrasse, and that guy was a beast. He just went in there and decimated these guys.
And they're awesome fish too.
Oh, they're awesome. He actually turned into a super male. But I got him when he was tiny, and he grew up, and just all of a sudden one day he was amazing looking. Probably my favorite fish for a long, long time, because my tank was covered in red planaria. I mean, just covered. You couldn't see rock. You could barely see sand. I mean, it was just everywhere. Tank just got out of hand, and you're like, wow, I suck at this. This is an epic failure, and I should quit. We've all been there, but you get over it. You get past it, and you see that everybody has gone through similar, if not the same. It's just kind of part of the journey. We forget that it's a living organism. It's not like your TV. You plug it in and it works. It's this thing. It lives and breathes, and you get everything that comes along with it. It's just part of the journey, good or bad. I mean, if I didn't get red planaria, I would never have bought that Melanaris wrasse, and then I would never have got to see it go from a juvenile to this super male specimen. So that there's a positive to everything.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I get it. I battled dinos for a year, and then people that I highly respect in the hobby, who'd been around the block a long time in the hobby like I have, were taking like this dismissive old school response to dinos, because back in the day, dinos were just like a part of your reef's succession plan, right? It's like, all right, first we get this nasty, then we get that nasty, and then eventually it was like, okay. So I saw like a lot of veteran reef keepers be like, yeah, dinos, they go away, like, relax, and it's like, no, I know what these people are talking about, because I battled mine for a year, a freaking year. I was terrified to do water changes, because every time I did a water change, I had a dino explosion. And yeah, it's frustrating, and it makes you just want to throw in the towel. But if it was easy, it would get boring, right? And eventually your tank falls in line. Sometimes I wonder if like all the stuff we do is just to keep us busy while it's naturally getting to its natural conclusion, right? It's like, if you went on vacation for, or a sabbatical for 6 months and you came back, like it would have fixed itself.
Yeah.
But you spent 6 months like, plugging in a UV and doing this and doing that. And you're like, oh, I fixed it. I don't know. But yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, what's weird is when have a problem I need to fix, I'm actually more engaged with my tank. When the tank is coasting and everything looks great, that's when I get not burnt out, but bored. And then it's at that point where, I usually tell my wife, like, oh, I'm going to tear down this tank. I'm just going to have one tank. And she always tells me, like, you do this, and then next year you're going to be setting up another tank. Like, this, right? And so, and she's always right. And that's where I'm at. I mean, my tank is coasting. Things are good, knock on wood. But I don't know. It's like I like sitting in front of it, but it's like I'm not excited to see what's going on with the hobby right now. Like I'm not as engaged. And it doesn't have to do with summer or spring. People are like, oh, it's summertime. You want to go outside. So I've been kind of battling that, But the other thing is too, like, I'm not a collector, right? I don't have collectoritis. I don't want to keep buying corals every month and running out of room. So if you're not buying corals and you're not like, buying expensive lights and trying out new gear, eventually you're just staring at it and watching it grow slowly. And I don't know. So
this is an actual therapy session, guys.
Yeah. Well, that's what it was always meant to be, right? So
I think Jake said at one point he just bought you corals so that you would put corals in your tank.
Well, yeah, he'd always be like, you don't have enough corals. And I'm like, yeah, but that coral is going to grow like the size of a volleyball, It's like, well, yeah, but then you just deal with it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have 30 other tanks to redistribute to, So he would give me shit. I took a Jason Fox acro that was 10 inches, and I hacked the shit out of it and I threw it in the yard and I just regrew one frag. And he was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not a coral vendor, right? I don't want to spend my days at FedEx or UPS. I don't want a bunch of people coming over to my house constantly for frags. It's just so, what do you do with it? You throw it in the yard and it becomes calcium supplement for your grass or something. I don't know,
Dog finds it, brings it in.
I had a bunch of live rock out there once, or dead rock, not live rock, but and I left it out there to air dry after I bleached it so I could just store it. I killed everything on it with bleach and I just left it on my deck to air dry. And then I stuck it in a bin, a Rubbermaid, and I put the lid on it and I stuck it in a shelf in my basement. And then when it came time I needed some rock, I opened up the bin and there's a dead snake in there. Completely emaciated. I felt terrible. So this thing must have crawled into one of the rocks at night. Like, yeah, this is a cool little hidey hole. And then next day picked up all the rocks, stuck it in a Rubbermaid. He could never get out. And the poor thing, I don't know if it died of thirst or hunger. I felt terrible, but I screamed like, a 6-year-old girl. Like, you're in your comfort of your own home and you're opening up a Rubbermaid and there's a snake in there. You're like, ah! So.
Okay, throwing coral in the yard. Sad for the snake.
It was, yeah, I felt terrible. Like, as, like this poor, like, that's a horrible way to die, stuck in a plastic tote.
Yeah. Have you, let me ask you this. Have you gone through this before? Have you gone through this, like, I'm kind of indifferent about where I'm at right now in the hobby?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's why my involvement with Reef Builders was the way it was. Because I would always have a reef tank and I'd always be growing something. But before I did much like the podcast, my communication in the hobby would ebb and flow. So I was just, Jake used to joke I would be a hermit. When in real life, I'm not. I'm out having a great time. but I would just disappear off their map, and then all of a sudden I'd randomly call them and be like, he lives, you know. So so yeah, I don't know, I tend to do that. I just don't have the budget to buy the latest and greatest light every year, right? So it's not like I'm swapping out my hardware. And I don't know how people do it. Like, eventually, like, if you bought corals every month, after like a few months, your tank would be chock full. Like, what do you do? I mean, you know, some people upgrade, some people get rid of corals, but yeah.
I don't know, with the size of frags these days,
Well, yeah.
you know, they're so small. I mean, back in the day, the frags were huge, so you really couldn't fit that many. And now they've gotten so tiny, you can fit 1,000 frags in a tank, in any normal sized tank, quite easily. I don't know if you can afford 1,000 frags, but
well, there's that. I mean, I agree with you on that, and sometimes the burnout is just it's not that I, you know, like, I have a budget for reef keeping and have a nice reef tank, so I can't complain, but it's like after a while, everything seems to be about money, you know? It's like, oh, $1,000 lights, $300 frags, and it's like, even if you can afford it, you're just like, you just feel kind of like sold to the whole time, and that's not a hobby, you know? To me, that's like, I don't know. I mean, you guys don't ever feel that?
Do you feel compelled that you need to upgrade every time there's a new light out? Because I feel like... No. I mean, okay.
But I feel like everything I go on to with YouTube or the forums... I was on Reef Beef recently. Like, it hasn't come out yet, but we were just talking about it. And I don't know if you guys remember Scott Fellman.
Yeah.
I had to copy what he said, because I don't feel this way 100%, but let's see, I'm going to find it. But he talked about why he went into the plant world and started doing those botanicals for those cool, like, hardscape supplies for planet tanks.
He does all the tannin tanks now.
Yeah, tannin aquatic.
The colors out of the water, he's putting them in it.
Yeah, and he talked about how he got burned out on the reef hobby because it turned into, quote unquote, and Scott, I apologize for quoting you on 2 podcasts now, but it's just like, I couldn't have said it better, like, a largely superficial endeavor dominated by the marketing and glorification of acquiring tiny, overpriced, exotically named hyped collector coral frags and expensive gear, placing material acquisition or superficial hype over knowledge. And I'd be honest, there are days I feel like that, where I'm just like, you know, there's still plenty of us around that want to talk about the sciencey, nerdy stuff, but I feel like they're not, you know, we're not center stage anymore. And so part of me gets a little burnt out by that too. So, which I know is it's become a Mark therapy session. I apologize, because it doesn't have so much to do with like an algae outbreak or something frustrating you. But I don't know. I mean, you not feel that at all? Like, you don't have that, like, the material side starts to kind of make it less romantic, or?
For sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think a lot like how the internet kind of moves and how we're seeing this influx of artificial intelligence, like, I suddenly feel behind, whereas maybe 10 years ago with social media, I felt like I was way ahead of the curve, and now I feel like I've taken a little bit of a break on that, and now I'm behind. And maybe even, you know, the people that are dealing with artificial intelligence feel like they're behind as well. But there's a little bit of, like, you know, I think when I first got into the hobby and started making YouTube videos, I was known as the zoanthid guy, and I had all the zoanthids and all the different names and all that. And I aside from the ones that, you know, I was privy to when I first started doing that, there's so many more names now, and I feel so behind when people are like, I'll get Instagram questions all the time about, you know, whatever and whatever zoanthid, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is anymore. And there's that quote that belongs on one of those signs in a kitchen, I feel like. Yeah. that's like the basic reefer version of like one of those quotes that you'd put on a vinyl sticker on your wall. I think it encapsulates so much of, what people are feeling but don't know how to put words to it.
Yeah. It's and it's not just our hobby. I mean, every hobby I participate in is like that, right? The number one, I don't know if it's number one, but I think it's number one guitar forum is called The Gear Page, because it's less about playing music and more about the gear, right? Like, let me post like a shot of my guitar leaning against a tree in the sunshine. I've got the, made of some rare wood collected, in some jungle in Africa that they cut and aged in a kiln. And it's like, okay, I love camping, fly fishing, and many years ago I picked up an old beat up Jeep, and that I took that, camping and fly fishing, and I was like, oh, how do I fix this on a Jeep? And you end up on a Jeep forum, and it's just guys like putting every accessory they can on a Jeep. And if that makes them happy, I'm happy for them. But it was like, oh, this is not my scene, like I just want to, like, I want to see pictures of people taking their Jeeps cool places, or something. So it's not just us. It's just, there's that, I don't know. Maybe it says more about me, like, and what I like and dislike than the hobby itself, right? Like, maybe I've become less materialistic or something. I don't know.
Getting to that get off my lawn stage in life.
Yeah, I'm like 5 steps away from like living in the woods and, growing my own food on a homestead, and I don't know.
What about you, maker of the cool gear?
Well, I've always been into the gear. I always liked the cool stuff. And even when I couldn't afford it, I wanted to make my own and tinkered with stuff, but I was always tinkering with the stuff and always wanted to make something better or get the next thing that was better. But that has slowed to a certain extent now. Like my phone, for instance, I don't get the new phone every year, every 2 years. If it's still doing everything that I want it to do, I keep my phone. But I still like looking at and geeking out over the new ones, and seeing what they do better and seeing their features and all that stuff. Is that I like that. And the same thing applies to, reefing. I still like checking out all the new gear that comes out and all the new tech and, just where things are going. It doesn't mean I have to buy it, but I get enjoyment over looking at it.
I think for me, when I feel a little bit like I'm losing interest in a particular side or niche of the hobby, that's kind of what drew me into, my clownfish are laying eggs. Let's just try this out.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever felt a sense of euphoria like I did when and this is so nerdy, when I pulled out a rotifer culture and put it in a glass bowl and just saw one of some tiny form of life that is going to help these tiny fry survive. And I got the chills. It was weird. And I think that's the kind of stuff that will like re-energize you into the hobby. There's so many different facets of the hobby. There's so many different things that so many routes you can go down. So if the mixed reef isn't really doing it for you anymore, if the, still keep the coral, maybe light it different. Maybe put some of those in white light. Maybe, try a different biotope or something. We talked about turtle grass tonight. That's a cool thing that not a whole lot of people are doing. So I think maybe trying out those other niches, those other facets within the saltwater hobby would be cool. Maybe even going freshwater with some Ultim Angels.
Let's not go that far.
But yeah, I think that's usually what kind of gets me out of a funk.
I like innovation, I saw that, that one guy created a protein skimmer. It melds a protein skimmer with a filter roller. And I thought that was really interesting, right? Because it's like you're just collecting all of that skimmate and just removing it with a filter roll. I'm like, that's actually really cool. That stuff, and so I don't want to beat up on the hardware companies, because I think like they're always innovating, right? Like I think they come out with a newer light because they're like, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I think that's really cool. It's just like, it's more just how it's, I don't know. Like the most talked about corals are the most expensive ones now, right? And I guess it always has been that way if you think about it, but it's just, there's like, I think also the discoveries are different now. There's still coral, now people are spawning corals at home. Fish breeding has been amazing in the last, few years. I mean, we have captive bred tangs and captive bred regal angels. Like that stuff excites me. I don't like that it's $600 for a fish, because I'm like, dude. But it is what it is. But so that stuff excites me. But I think it was a little more Wild West back in the day too. We were still figuring out a lot of stuff, and now I think we've got it figured out for the most part. We still run into the nuisance algae and arguing about nitrates and phosphates, but I don't know. And it's also where you are in your journey, right? If you're still learning, if you're like, what is ozone? Wait, what ozone does what? Like then if it's all new and exciting and you're still tinkering, and you're, like, whoa, what is this carbon dosing thing? Oh, I want to try that. But I think if you've tried a lot of things, you've done a lot of things, then you don't have as many of those little exciting moments, where you're like having that eureka, like what you had with the rotifers. Like those are not as common anymore, So, but I think what helps is talking to people that are passionate about the hobby and just having that human connection, like you talking to you guys on Reef Therapy. Just that phone call with Chris Meckley, and like some of the stuff that was racking around in his brain about his coral farm. And it's like, oh, okay. Then you have that for that brief little period of time after, you have like a different lens on your own reef tank again. You're looking at it a little bit differently. You're like, ooh, I see you, like Pavonia growing in the corner. Like, I see what you're doing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I always liked about shows is you go there and you're just hanging around with all these people that have this similar interest, and you have all these conversations around this hobby. Yeah. And you come back almost, like you said, invigorated, right? You're back into it. You feel good. And yeah, sometimes I think we just need that. Wherever you are in your journey in this hobby, just be around other hobbyists.
There's only a select few of us that will have these conversations with each other. It just happened today. Everybody at the radio station knows that I have this weird coral thing in my basement. And we had these guys come in, and this doesn't typically happen anymore, where you've got like a new innovative product that comes in, but these guys came in, and I think the brand is called Fins, and they make T-shirts and apparel that they use plastic bottles to make these shirts. And on every label, there's like how many bottles are in your shirt. And it's kind of cool. You have 10 plastic bottles that made this shirt. And one of the girls in the room piped up, and she was like, oh, that would be great for your coral. And I was like, I don't know. She's like, why is it every time that we bring up coral around other people, you act like you don't know what you're doing, like what's going on? And it's like, well, because when I get into it, I want to get into it deep. Like, I don't want to just sit here and be like, well, I have coral in my basement. Coral is an animal. And yes, it is part of the saltwater aquarium hobby. I want to get into it deep. So it helps to have a friend too. I've got some really good friends here in St. Louis, and we'll hang out. We'll, end up at the local fish store together and just look at stuff and talk about stuff. And that helps to reinvigorate for sure. So, very long answer to a question, but we're all going through, like you said, Mark, there's different facets of this. It could be the obstacle of the flatworms, of the nuisance algae. It could just be getting a little lackadaisical about everything.
Yeah, but
could
it's
be
technology. That's
technology,
the
could
key.
be-
Is
yeah.
like, believe me, I've torn down tanks thinking like, I just want to have one tank. I'm burnt out, and then 6 months later, I'm setting up something random. So, don't tear down your tank. Don't give up. Just, even if you're convinced that you're like, screw this. 6 months later, you'll be like, oh, I'm glad I didn't tear down that tank. I truly feel it's cyclical. But yeah, we all go through it.
Yeah. Plus, in like 6 to 9 months, you'll have an even bigger problem that'll make this one look really small.
Yeah, that's true. That's the other thing about not buying a lot of corals is once you've gotten your pests taken care of, if you don't put new shit in, you're good. You're golden. Like you just keep growing the corals that you have and be that boring guy. But like, hey, I don't have aptasia. So
yeah, for sure. Well, guys, do you have anything else that I know we didn't get to the local fish store fire stuff, but we can talk about that in the next one. I'll have a little bit more insight on that as well, as FJW just had a fire, and Gateway Aquatics here in St. Louis just had a fire as well. So maybe I can talk from a more educated standpoint on that. Causes, things of that nature, because obviously we deal with a lot of electricity and water and things like that. So I'm guessing that's probably where most of that starts, but I think we can get into that in the next episode. You guys want to say anything else before we depart?
No, I worry I turned into a bit of a downer at the end. I didn't mean to, but talking about dead snakes and capitalism, like I'm sounding anti-capitalist or something, which I'm not, but so I know.
Can't wait for
Get
the
him out
comments
of
on
here.
that.
No.
There hasn't been a replace Mark. There's only been a replace Remy so far. So.
Ooh, challenge accepted.
We're just gonna kick this guy out too, so don't worry about it. Mark's Mark's the only safe
well, guys, were you gonna say something? Sorry.
No, I was just gonna joke about ways that I could make myself less appealing, but never mind.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Reef Therapy. Again, if you have any comments, and I would love to get your feedback on some of those questions that we asked in the beginning. If any comments, any follow up, please let us know in the comments section on the YouTube channel. If you're not on YouTube and you're just listening to the audio version, hop on over to the YouTube channel if you've actually got a question that's burning. Or you can always hit us up on any of the Reef Builders socials. All right, Reef Builders, we will see you in the next one. We'll see you guys.
See you. Thanks, Remy.
See ya.